China's birth rates.
This chart shows China's birth and death rate over the last 60 years. For most of it, births are high. But in 2022, China had more deaths than births.
Schlatt TikTok taking over politics.
Hey, how do you feel about the current socioeconomic climate in America?
I think hamburgers and cheeseburgers work well with fries.
True.
Hey, how do you feel about the
Fucking killed it. He's so right. I agree with that. There is nothing that's so good. What? Trans woman beats transphobic guy. Can you cover a positive trans story, please? No.
Causing its population to decrease for the first time in 6 decades.
Good luck, creepy cool.
To get why this is such a big deal, consider this. China is the world's manufacturing superpower, and that's in large part because of its huge population. Nearly 30% of the country's economic output comes from manufacturing. Now here's China's population over the last 60 years. Even after losing almost 1 million people in 2022, its population is still about as big as it's ever been, 1.4 billion people. But that's projected to shrink by nearly half by the end of the century. Over the years, China's growth and policies have contributed to its population decline. Today, it's looking to reverse course, to keep its population steady. The problem is, it might be too late. In the 50s, under Mao, China experienced one of the most gruesome famines on record. 30 million people died. If we look at that on the birth and death rates chart, you'll see a big spike in deaths. At the same time, the birth rate dropped, causing the population to shrink. But as often happens with wars, famines, and other major crises, immediately after, there was a baby boom. Combined with global medical advances that decreased infant mortality rates, China's average family now had 6 children. The birth rate had skyrocketed, which the government saw as a big problem.
The Chinese leadership realized the population was growing too fast and something needs to be done. The government came out with a policy.
They called it later, longer, fewer. Later marriages, longer birth intervals, and fewer births. As a result, China's birth rate started trending down, but it wasn't low enough for China's leaders. And in 1980, they implemented the extreme one-child policy, which limited most families to 1 child.
That policy was also backed up by very harsh measures. There were campaigns of sterilization, IUD insertion, and induced abortions.
And while these campaigns began during the later, longer, fewer era, they were at their worst under the one-child policy, when China sterilized 20 million men and women and induced nearly 15 million abortions in a single year. But China had accomplished its goal. Population growth was under control. Except, as China would soon realize, these restrictive policies worked a little too well. In order for any population to stay the same size in the long run, each couple needs to have, on average, 2.1 children. This is called the replacement rate. The idea is that 1 child replaces 1 parent, and that 0.1 makes up for children who die before they become adults.
Isn't sex education the most effective birth control? No, the most effective birth control is development. That's it. That's literally it. Most effective way to just reduce birth rates is by 1, not having any immigration, and 2, just massive development. Look at Japan. That's it. Xenophobic immigration policies paired up with like massive amounts of development will immediately eviscerate your birth rate if that's something that you want to do. Which, by the way, ironically played a role in China's birth rates diminishing as well.
But China...
What else? I mean, there's some other shit too, like fucking making it super expensive, child rearing, child development being super expensive, not having a lot of opportunities, not having a lot of free time in your workplace, not having any like economic, not having any like having a gigantic economic burden, making the cost of living expensive. Reddit, that's a good one. True. Hentai and anime, that's another good one as well. For sure.
Has had a fertility rate that's far below 2 for over 3 decades. To bring that up, in 2016, China finally ended the one-child policy. And after briefly trying out a 3-child policy, in 2021, they finally let families have as many children as they'd like. But it hasn't worked. One big reason is the unique family structure produced by the 1-child policy.
We're looking at what's called a 4-to-1 family structure, with a couple having 4 parents above them and 1 child below.
Most countries have diverse family structures, some with 3 kids, others with none. But with China's 4-to-1 model, millions of only children are under increasing pressure to care for their aging parents and...
Yeah, you're right, Chowder. This is why they need the dick-sucking factory. To suck their dicks dry and pump it in to wherever. Jordan Peterson was right about that.
elderly grandparents, and this can make having multiple children even harder, especially as the cost of living keeps rising. A recent survey revealed that more than 50% of
South China Morning Post: China's rising living costs, economic uncertainties leave power income groups unwilling or unable to spend.
Keeps rising. A recent survey revealed that more than 50% of young people don't want more than one child because of financial and work pressures.
They were seeing cash subsidies for additional birth, longer maternal leaves, subsidizes for kindergarten, and all sorts of monetary support. Well, the thing is, almost none of them has worked because having a child is exceedingly expensive and it's a lifelong commitment. And so it's really actually hard to put a price on this.
But China's population crisis isn't just about babies. It's also about the balance between young and old. If we look at population pyramids that show distribution by age, we see that countries like Kenya, with rapid population growth, look like this: wide at the bottom, representing a lot of new young people, and narrow at the top. Countries experiencing slower growth, like the Philippines, are still triangular, but the difference...
Yeah, I wonder why. Yeah, because old people fucking die. People don't even make it to old age. That's what it is. Like that's it. That's it. When you're not a developed nation, purposely kept behind by colonial superpowers, you just, and you have a lot of issues with child mortality during pregnancy complications, things like that, as a consequence of like not having adequate medicine, like the United States of America. Kidding. The United States of America is pretty fucking dog shit, but still better in comparison, at least. But yeah, that factors into your life expectancy, but that also factors into having more children.
Between top and bottom is less pronounced. Now take a look at China and notice the narrow bottom, so fewer babies, and the heavy top, a larger number of elderly people.
Which is a happy outcome of our improvement in health and in standard of living, but combined with sustained low fertility, and that just produces sustained population aging.
In 2050, that pyramid is projected to look like this. And that will further drive down China's population, shrink its labor force, and put the whole country in a uniquely difficult position. In the 80s, China became a hotspot for foreign investment, cheap manufacturing, and exports.
A generation later, it was shooting up the ranks and becoming one of the world's leading and fastest growing economies by GDP. But not only did that economic modernization drive birth rates down further, it also didn't translate to an equally strong economy for everyone.
If we look at the GDP per capita, the best in...
It's so funny. It's like, dude, China will collapse anytime now is like always the argument. But also at the same time, it's like China's going to collapse tomorrow is such a funny argument to make about this issue, particularly because like it's one that America has only been able to avoid with obviously immigration, and many other developed nations also have the same issue.
Indicator we have for standard of living, China is much lower than these high-income countries. China became a major world economy nearly overnight, but it's still a middle-income country. Many, especially in rural areas, haven't benefited much from China's economic boom. And China has
Okay, that's wild. Dude, come on, dude. That's bananas, brother. That is actually fucked up. That's insane. That is, oh my God. Okay, listen. That, yeah, that, Americans can't fucking look at like other countries and genuinely, if a country is declared a foreign adversary, there's no way that you can ever look at it objectively. And Vox is supposed to be like a progressive outlet, right? But of course, China is a national enemy. So therefore, like objectively, one of the most fascinating achievements in contemporary history is Chinese development and how aggressively successful it has been. Okay? Obviously, there are still rural areas that have not benefited in the same way as like tier 1 cities have, but the notion that the Chinese rural development in comparison to like the United States of America, for example, has not been infinitely more egalitarian is insane. Okay? That's crazy. China does have a slightly greater poverty rate than America, but the overall poverty rate is much lower than 90% of countries. You have to look at where China was 30 fucking years ago in comparison to where China is now. You can't look at... This is a really, really annoying part of like doing any kind of political analysis that people engage in, where they refuse to look at how fast development has occurred and how evenly that development has occurred, and then compare it to another country that's like even comparable. America has been stagnant for a very long time, with our birth rates also declining. Now, of course, the only way that America has been able to deal with the declining birth rate is by literally immigration. That's number one, okay? But it's like irresponsible almost to look at look at an admission that you made here where like even life expectancies increase in rural areas, and then simultaneously let go of that fundamental piece of information that implies that there has been prosperity, okay? Not in the same as like obviously rural areas of China are not fucking a tier 1 city. You know what I mean? It's like not everywhere looks like Shenzhen or whatever. But that still doesn't matter. There has been a dramatic improvement on the quality of life in rural areas in China in comparison to like an unimaginable development in comparison to like fucking Alabama. Exactly. What the fuck? That doesn't mean that like poverty has been completely eviscerated, but you have to compare it. You have to compare it to where China was 30 fucking years ago. The funniest part about this is that if this was like the United States that did a fraction of this kind of development, according to the World Bank, more than 850 million Chinese people have been lifted out of extreme poverty. China's poverty rate fell from 88% in 1981 to 0.7% in 2015. The Western world loves looking at the USSR, okay, and taking advantage of the USSR's like many benefits, okay, and significant burden like in World War II, and then claiming it for themselves. Just like the Western world loves looking at China and Chinese development and only talk about how global poverty has been lifted dramatically on the planet exclusively in fucking China, like almost entirely in China. Remove China from the equation of extreme poverty globally, and obviously if you rate adjust it one more time to like an actual rate of extreme poverty and not change it, you will get a very different picture. The fuck? How influencers cover up crimes against humanity? What? The Uyghur influencers portray their homeland in Xinjiang as an idyllic and prosperous. However, numerous incredible reports ongoing crimes. Wait, what? Dog, rural USA is just individual Ohios all over the place. Japan has been stagnating for almost 30 years now. It's an idiotic comparison to China. Japan modernized much earlier than China. Yeah. Anyway, let's continue.
Has yet to develop the necessary safety nets to support its aging population.
To build the social infrastructure, like the social programs in healthcare and in pension, it takes time. And that's getting actually tougher with the economy that's slowing down.
And a slower economy will inevitably redefine China's role in the world as a manufacturing superpower.
What this means for China, for the
Yes, right after World War II, the predominant view is that in the West was that the USSR had beat the Nazis. But since then, and as tons of propaganda has been proliferated, the view almost completely shifted to the U.S. having beaten the Nazis. Yeah, that is half a century of propaganda has dramatically shifted the attitude of even the French. You know what I mean? Like in France, I believe there was a study conducted immediately after World War II that showed that the French believed by like 75% or something, I'm not getting the numbers exactly right, that the USSR lifted the greatest, shouldered the majority of the burden. Yeah, here, this is another, ironically, this is also a Vox article, but yeah, 57% thought that the Soviet Union deserved the most credit for Nazi Germany's defeat in 1945. Now, in 2004, 58% believe that America deserves it. Think about that.
the world is that the resource constraints from within.
America deserves what? The top of the hour ad break, of course. At the top of the hour, there's a 3-minute ad break. But if you don't feel like you deserve the top of the hour ad break, all you need to do is subscribe, which you can do for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime by connecting your Amazon Prime account to your Twitch account, where you get 1 free Prime subscription a month. That's right. Use it on your favorite broadcaster. Hopefully that's me. Or you may be able to get gifted a sub. If you're lucky, here's the 3-minute ad break now. That's another way that you can avoid the ad breaks. Prop 65 warning. Thank you for this gifted sub.
Would also constrain the Chinese ambition and its global reach.
In some ways, China isn't alone. A lot of Asian and European countries are experiencing population declines too. What makes China different is how fast this all has happened. It was only 40 years ago that China started leveraging its booming population to become an economic superpower.
When you mention China, you should also mention the Tiananmen Square massacre, if you dare. What? If you dare? I don't give a shit. Kev Rhino, thank you for the 5
still
the subs.
trying to stem population growth.
He said, if you dare.
Now that China's population growth is officially over, China may have to rethink its future, not just as a global superpower, but for its citizens at home, too.
They did another one. Why China's losing the microchip war? Okay, we're not going to do that, though. We're going to look at